Welcome, everyone. My name is Farah Hassan, the sleep education specialist here at Project Sleep, streaming to you live from Toronto, Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a very special broadcast in preparation for World Narcolepsy Day, which is coming up on September 22nd. This sixth annual World Narcolepsy Day is dedicated to raising global awareness for narcolepsy, and the day is co-led by 32 patient advocacy organizations on 6 different continents around the world. Project Sleep will also be hosting a special panel discussion on World Narcolepsy Day, and we have an awesome virtual photo booth where you can take pictures with custom frames and stickers to raise awareness around narcolepsy. So please be sure to check out Project Sleep's World Narcolepsy Day webpage and also our social media for more information and links to participate. If you're joining us live, we would love to know where you're coming in from. So please share the state or country that you're watching from, and be sure to like, comment, and share the video so that we can continue to raise awareness and welcome new people to our community. I'd also like to encourage everyone to share your questions and comments for our awesome presenter, Liesel, throughout the broadcast. She's going to be answering some questions after her presentation. And today's broadcast is being recorded live, so it will be available for viewing in the next day or two. Please note that this broadcast is a public video, and so the comments will stay with the video. So please don't share anything in the comments or live chat that you wouldn't want to share publicly. Before I turn it over to Liesel, a quick reminder to everyone tuning in that today's presentation and discussion is intended for educational and awareness purposes, and it is not medical advice. We want to empower you with information, but if anything that's discussed today sparks questions for you about your own medical management, please make sure that you bring those questions to your healthcare team or your sleep specialist. So that wraps up all of my housekeeping items. We can finally get on to what we're all here for. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Liesel Mitchell is a coffee-loving conversationalist and a researcher and writer from Aotearoa, New Zealand. She has lived with type 1 narcolepsy and type 1 narcolepsy with cataplexy since she was 15, and she wants to start conversations in Aotearoa about this invisible neurological condition. Liesel is excited to raise awareness through Project Sleep's Rising Voices program and to share the many positive insights that she has gained from managing life with narcolepsy. And now I will turn it over to Liesel to share her inspiring story with us.
And thank you. Thanks for this invitation to speak as part of World Narcolepsy Day. And I'm really excited to share my story today. So I'm from Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I was born here in the capital city, Te Whanganui-a-Tara, or Wellington, as some of you may know it. And as a kid, I always loved books and could read from about the age of 4. I was also one of those kids that loved to talk. My mum said I was a conversationalist pretty much from birth. When I was 5, we moved to Long Beach, California for a couple of years to live there while my dad studied for his PhD. The family photo you can see on my slide on the left is from that time in America in the early 80s, and captures that I like to be a bit special. There I am, note the pose, the outfit, while my sister is the cute one snuggling up to my mum. Excuse me. The picture on the right is me back in Aotearoa in Tamaki, Makaurau, also Auckland, on my 10th birthday. Important things for me at this time were things like music, friends, and River Phoenix, who was just starting to be my obsession. A few years later, when I was 14, we moved again to the other end of New Zealand. So I just started at a new school and I was on school music camp. It was July 1988 and I was 14 years old. So if you can imagine, there I was with my friend Berry in the back row of the choir practice, standing on some wooden benches so we could see the conductor above everybody else. Now, Berry was this friend of mine who always made me laugh. She was dry, irreverent, and quite hilarious. And I don't know what it was she said as we were standing there, but I started laughing. And the next thing I knew, I had fallen off the bench onto the floor. I wasn't hurt, but I was really shaken and quite surprised by what had just happened. One minute I was laughing, normal, and the next I was falling, not normal. It had all happened so fast, I couldn't really explain what had just occurred. What I did know is that the laugh that made me fall wasn't just any old laughing. It wasn't so much a joke with a punchline kind of laugh. It was more like that laugh that happens when you have one of those kind of totally right, hilarious moments where something just kind of clicks inside you. And in my case, made me collapse to the floor. When I came home from music camp, I told my mum what had happened, and she responded by rolling her eyes and saying, "You're such a drama queen, Liesel." And I tried to tell her I wasn't being dramatic, but I probably had a bit of a history of telling stories about myself that sounded way more exciting than they really were. So I think my mum was sort of just decided that this was me trying to get some extra attention. Perhaps a month after falling off the benches on music camp, my mum, me, and my good friend Mirinda were all in town walking across the car park from the supermarket to the car. Mirinda and I were just talking away, and then Mirinda said something particularly funny, and suddenly I found myself collapsing onto the concrete in the middle of the car park. I guess the combination of it being such a public place and the fact my mum saw all of this happening meant she realised that I hadn't been making something dramatic up. I really did seem to laugh and then fall to the ground in a heap. And this picture that I've got on the slide is one of the best visuals I have ever seen that captures how I feel when I laugh and then suddenly collapse. Everything from the muscles in my face, jaw, neck, to my arms, and most importantly, my knees, just buckle out from under me, like someone has pressed the giraffe button. So because my mum had seen me collapse in the middle of the car park and understood this wasn't just me being really dramatic, she quickly got me an appointment with our family GP, who saw me right away and then referred me to a specialist at the hospital. Initially, I was referred to the cardiology department because my doctor thought the sudden collapsing might be related to my heart. For some reason, this sounded extremely scary. I remember thinking that having heart problems sounded very serious. However, after a series of tests, they didn't find anything wrong with my heart, which I was really relieved about. So when the cardiologist suggested my laughing and collapsing might be a brain thing, that actually sounded much less scary than heart problems and much more interesting to me. I was referred then to neurology. I underwent some tests like EEGs, a brain scan to rule out the possibility of a brain tumor, and a sleep test to see what my brain was doing while I was sleeping. My tests confirmed a diagnosis of something called cataplexy, which I had never heard of before. And with this diagnosis, I was told that I would develop narcolepsy, which I had also never heard of. My neurologist was this young, enthusiastic doctor who was doing research into cataplexy. So he was so excited to have a real live specimen to study, which I felt quite flattered to be. And shortly after diagnosis, he gave a medical research seminar with me as the star of his show. I remember it happened on my birthday, and I was led onto a stage, sat down on a chair, and I sort of sat there facing an auditorium of doctors and specialists, and I don't really remember doing anything except just sitting there feeling slightly bewildered about all the medical jargon and wondering why I wasn't being asked any questions. I remember at this time it felt really good to have an official name for the strange thing that was happening to me, but beyond that, my life didn't seem to be very different from before. This cataplexy thing was weird, but mostly the collapsing made me feel quite unique and a bit different from my friends. And when it wasn't happening, I would just ignore it even existed. I know now that I was really lucky. I got my diagnosis within 6 months of my first experience of laughing and collapsing. And the photo on the screen here is me at the age of diagnosis, 15, 1989 was when this was, and with my boyfriend at the time. And I'd just like to point out the extremely ugly school uniform that we had to wear. But this 15-year-old version of Liesel in the photo here had no idea what this diagnosis would mean for the life I was planning, for the future that I had imagined. Narcolepsy is a chronic neurological disorder of the sleep-wake cycle. It affects 1 in 2,000 people, which means approximately 3 million people worldwide have narcolepsy. Narcolepsy can be invisible to people. Even though as someone with this condition, it's very difficult to ignore, and I'm aware of the effects of living with narcolepsy every day. It can be invisible though, because narcolepsy can look like both these pictures that I've got on the screen. The picture on the left is what we might think life with narcolepsy is always like. And it does sometimes look like this. The picture on the right, though, is also what life looks like for someone with narcolepsy. And most people who know me, even people who spend quite a lot of time with me, would have only seen the Liesel on the right. So you might know someone really well and may not know that they have narcolepsy, as it's not always easy to see the symptoms. So what does the reality of narcolepsy look like? Well, symptoms can vary by person and may include things like excessive daytime sleepiness, which is periods of extreme sleepiness during the day that feel comparable to how someone without narcolepsy would feel after staying awake for maybe 48 to 72 hours. And because I knew that I would develop narcolepsy, I wasn't surprised when I started falling asleep during the day at odd times. These symptoms started in my early 20s while I was at university, and I was tired a lot of the time, and I'd often fall asleep in almost all of my lectures, actually. Art history was my major, and it was particularly difficult to stay awake. The lecture would always start with the lights on, bit of an intro from the lecturer, take some notes, and then boom, lights would go out, slide projector would go on, and the next 40 minutes we would sit in the dark watching slides of Italian art. And friends would say that they would see me fall asleep in lectures, pen scribbling off the edge of the page, and then when an important point was made, I'd wake up, write the point down, and then fall asleep again. Deciphering these hieroglyphics and scribbles on my notes was always challenging come exam time. I also lived in South Korea when I was in my late 20s, back in the early 2000s. And on one of my trips flying from Australia to Korea, I had the rather embarrassing experience of falling asleep on the shoulder of the guy sitting next to me. Now, I'd just spent a holiday doing lots of fun things with my parents, so it wasn't strange that I might be tired. What was strange was that I couldn't control my need to sleep. I got on the plane, and pretty much right away, before the plane had even taken off, I fell asleep. My head slumped over to the left, and I then remember waking up with a bit of a jolt, realizing my head was resting on the shoulder of the person beside me. But before I could even be embarrassed, I'd done it again. As this was not just a one-time thing where you fall asleep, wake up a bit embarrassed, and then ignore the person for the rest of the flight, hoping that they might forget that that ever happened. No, I would wake up, apologize to this guy, and then fall straight back to sleep on him. I may have told him I had narcolepsy in one of my waking moments. I can't really remember. But after several more shoulder sleeps, this very understanding human decided to make it easy for me. He put a pillow on his shoulder and just said, "Don't worry about it." So I didn't. And that was the time I slept on a complete stranger's shoulder on a 10-hour flight to Korea. And this would not be the first or last time I fell asleep on public transport or on strangers' shoulders. So these are examples of what is called excessive daytime sleepiness. Cataplexy is striking sudden episodes of muscle weakness, usually triggered by strong emotions such as laughter, exhilaration, surprise, or even anger. And the severity may vary from a slackening of the jaw or buckling of the knees to totally falling down. The duration may be just for a few seconds or to several minutes, and the person remains fully conscious, even if unable to speak during the episode. And earlier, when I told the story of laughing and then collapsing during music camp, this is an example of cataplexy. Another symptom can be hypnagogic and hypnopompic hallucinations, which are visual, auditory, or even tactile hallucinations upon falling asleep or waking up. And these can be frightening and confusing. Sleep paralysis is the inability to move for a few seconds or minutes upon falling asleep or waking up. And it is often accompanied by these hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations. And it's important to know that people without narcolepsy can experience these hallucinations and sleep paralysis. In fact, about 1/3 of all people experience these at some point in their lives, usually during periods of high stress or poor sleep. For people with narcolepsy, these are much more frequent and consistent over time. And I have occasionally experienced sleep paralysis and hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations, but they don't occur very often. Sometimes when I fall asleep unexpectedly during the day, say sitting in a really comfy chair, and I can be fully aware of things around me, I can hear people talking or music playing, but my eyes are closed and I can't move. And I feel completely heavy, kind of almost liquid, like I have the outline of my body, but no substance to hold it up. And this is the same feeling I get when I'm laughing and collapsing, or the cataplexy, but without the laughing or collapsing, but just completely unable to move my body. And this would be an example of sleep paralysis. I will also occasionally hear things as I'm going to sleep. One example of this was one night when I hadn't been in bed for very long and I felt like I was wide awake. I could distinctly hear two men talking on the roof outside my bedroom window. However, my window looks out over an internal glass atrium and it's almost impossible to get onto this roof, so nobody was actually there. And this would be an example of a hypnagogic hallucination. Another symptom is disrupted nighttime sleep. And unlike public perceptions, people with narcolepsy do not sleep all the time. Timing of sleepiness is off with narcolepsy. So one may fight sleepiness during the day and then struggle to sleep at night. I'm really lucky that my nighttime sleep is generally pretty good. I usually wake up once, sort of a bit like clockwork, really, 1:38 a.m. And as long as I get out of bed, go to the bathroom, grab a drink, this usually gives my sleep a bit of a reset, and I find I can usually get back to sleep right away. So there are two types of narcolepsy: narcolepsy with cataplexy and narcolepsy without cataplexy. And recent research suggests that narcolepsy with cataplexy is caused by a lack of hypocretin, a key neurotransmitter that helps to sustain alertness and regulate the sleep-wake cycle. Less is known about narcolepsy without cataplexy, and I have a diagnosis of this type 1 narcolepsy with cataplexy. So diagnosis typically includes a 24-hour sleep study that includes a nighttime portion, which is the polysomnography, and then a daytime nap portion, the multiple sleep latency test to record one's brainwaves. Now, the diagnosis is mainly based on how quickly and frequently one goes into rapid eye movement or REM, dream sleep stage, during these tests. And because I was diagnosed in 1989, back in the last century, there weren't dedicated sleep clinics for studying and diagnosing narcolepsy here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. For example, I didn't do a 24-hour sleep study. I only did the multiple sleep latency test. So if I was undergoing testing for narcolepsy today, there may be a different process from the one I went through for reaching a diagnosis. And I've included this picture on the slide, which is my neurologist's written diagnosis of cataplexy, definitely showing its age as it was done on a typewriter. So there is currently no cure for narcolepsy. Treatment for symptom management varies widely by person, but may include things like nighttime and histamine-directed medications to decrease excessive daytime sleepiness and cataplexy, or wake-promoting or stimulant medications to increase your alertness. It can also be antidepressant medication taken to decrease the occurrence of cataplexy. And I have to be honest, at first I was very reluctant to take any medication to treat narcolepsy. However, after 10 years of living with my symptoms, I realized that I wasn't able to live the type of life I wanted without some help. And once I decided to try medication, it really was a game changer. The type of medication that I take is designed to promote wakefulness, and it has been really effective for me. Medication has not only helped me feel more alert and less sleepy, but it also gave me confidence to know that I could do my job even with a sleep condition like narcolepsy. Another treatment is scheduled daytime naps. Now, I used to hate having naps in the day. In fact, my parents would tell you that I didn't sleep from about the age of 6 months. I'd given up naps. And I would always just feel like I was missing out on something. Why did I have to sleep when everyone else could just keep going on about their day? One of my close friends who I used to live with would see me starting to get sleepy, often after eating food, lunchtime, and he would tell me to go and have a nap. He was right. I needed to have a nap, and yet I would get so annoyed and feel like I was being told what to do. So this has been one of the toughest managing narcolepsy strategies for me personally to implement, even though having a nap when I am sleepy is the best thing I can do to stop feeling sleepy. And funnily enough, it's also one of the most effective to see an instant improvement. So now, instead of waiting for sleep to come and find me, I do try and take a 15-minute nap every afternoon after lunch, whether I feel really sleepy or not. Coping strategies for living with narcolepsy vary widely by person, but may include things like social support, such as meetup groups or social media, and improvement in general health and wellness through sleep hygiene, diet, and fitness. And I use a combination of these things to manage my narcolepsy, but routine, diet, and exercise are really important to me. Medication forms the base that means I can operate. The routines I have developed mean I operate well and have the best chance at staying awake when all these things are working together. For example, having consistent wake and sleep time seems to help me feel more alert during the day. And when I make changes to my routines, it also seems to have a really noticeable impact on my sleep symptoms. I am trying to make healthy food choices, and the amount of food I eat seems to be quite important. Smaller portions and more frequent food rather than big meals is helpful for staying alert. And limiting sugar intake, limiting my sugar, makes a huge difference to my alertness. I find just putting chocolate in my mouth, I start to feel sleepy. Exercise also keeps me in a routine, and I feel so much more alert when I am fit. I try to walk every single morning to catch the sunrise. Amazing. And it's quite easy, really. I have an alarm, it goes off, I have to get up. There is no alternative. So as I said at the beginning of this presentation, when I got my cataplexy diagnosis, I had no idea what this would really mean for me. Those first few years, I just tried to live normally and pretend it didn't really exist or affect my life. What I have discovered as I have slowly learned to accept narcolepsy is that my entire life is affected by it being a part of me. And so rather than fighting a lifelong condition, I have now set up my life with adjustments for narcolepsy. But this was not always the case. And this realization that narcolepsy was a real thing that I couldn't just ignore started when I was in my 20s and is an ongoing journey. In 1997, I trained to be a performing arts teacher and got my first job straight out of teacher training college. I was super excited about kicking off my first real job. And the photo on the far left there of a much younger me is Liesel, age 24, a newly minted teacher with my camera being performing artsy. And I loved teaching. It was amazing. I really felt like I'd found my thing, and teaching performing arts was incredible. Yet, very quickly, I realized that even with lots of compensation and understanding from my school, I was so tired I could barely do my job effectively and had almost no capacity to be awake and enjoy a life outside of work. During this year of teaching, I had a car accident because I fell asleep while driving. Luckily, only a wing mirror and a few rhododendrons were hurt, but as a result, I lost my driver's license. And from that moment on, my life was completely altered. I went from being independent, going where I wanted, when I wanted, to a restricted set of choices about how I could live and move around, which changed everything for me, including my ability to live in the town I was teaching in. I have included a photo of the car just under the 24-year-old Liesel, as it's the only car I've ever owned. And sometimes I wish it could have been something, how can I put this, just a whole lot cooler. The car accident was my literal wake-up call to face narcolepsy. I had to manage my symptoms and accept that I had a condition that was with me for life, that was messing with my hopes, my dreams, plans, and aspirations, and I just couldn't ignore this fact any longer. It's taken a really long time for me to wrap my head around this, but I have learned to accept now that I have a role to play in living with narcolepsy. I no longer want to be this passive participant, just along for the ride. So I have been learning to make choices, which I've discovered takes quite a lot of discipline. For example, choosing where I live has to factor in more than, it's just affordable, or I love this place. I also need to choose based on how accessible it is to supermarkets, public transport, my work, hobbies, and other activities. So as a result, while it's not always easy being sensible, I know that my choices have a real impact on the quality of my life. One of the biggest challenges for me is making choices about having fun. My cataplexy in particular is a total fun killer for me. Remember how earlier I mentioned cataplexy is brought on by these strong emotions like laughter? This kind of means fun tends to trigger the collapsing giraffe button in me, which is a great party trick when I was 15, but now it's something I really try to avoid. Even still, I love being around fun friends who make me laugh. In fact, the middle picture here shows me with a couple of friends. One of them is longtime friend Marinda, there on the right, who I was with in the car park when my mum first saw me collapse, and she still makes me laugh. Below that photo, there's also a picture of me at the beach on holiday being a bit silly. There's me. It's usually me taking the silly selfie while others are trying to exit stage right. Yep, that's my partner trying to avoid the camera. And it is tough pulling this sort of laughing, fun part of myself in. I mean, who wants to police how much fun they have? So a little coping trick I have is to prop myself up against a wall or find somewhere to sit down, and then I can keep the fun going a little bit longer, knowing if I laugh and feel my knees start to buckle, I have some support. And as luck would have it, I actually have a photo of me using a wall to hold myself up. Well, probably not for cataplexy in this case, but included because this is often what I look like mid-fun, trying to stay up. Another challenge for me has been balancing my extroverted, attention-seeking, drama queen people personality with an energy battery that is always running down. So I've had to come to terms with the fact that I may be an extrovert, but my narcolepsy is an introvert. So there's this push and pull of these two dynamics inside me. One of the ways that I try to manage this is to try and just plan for people time. A couple of one-on-one meetups in a week usually works, but not much more. And sometimes I get the balance right, and other times not so much. So when I tell people that I have narcolepsy, most respond with curiosity and interest. Oh, I've never met anyone with narcolepsy before. What is that again? Is that something to do with epilepsy? Or do you pass out or something? And some comment, oh, you are so lucky. I wish I could just fall asleep whenever I wanted to. And I remember one memorable comment when someone said, yeah, I totally have a nap sometimes after lunch. I think I must have a touch of the narcolepsy too. Another type of response from people who are trying to be helpful, but just are not, is when I've fallen asleep in a public place. Now, I can understand it must be quite strange to see someone asleep in public, but in some cases, just as I've nodded off, I've then been suddenly woken up by a random helpful someone. And when I'm woken suddenly, it can feel really unpleasant. So I remember once responding quite rudely with, "What?" To which the person helpfully said, "Oh, you were falling asleep." Yes, I was. However, in my experience, most people are really understanding if I give them a chance to understand. So I know this sounds a bit cheesy, but I think living with narcolepsy has taught me to be a better version of myself. Living with narcolepsy has helped me become disciplined, organized, more empathetic to other people's struggles, and it has forced me to actually look after my body. The fact that I can't drive means I get the physical and the mental benefits of walking everywhere. And I get really good sleep because I function so much better with a strict waking and sleeping routine. So the things I need to function really well are actually things we all benefit from paying attention to. So I'm really grateful I have a very good reason to be as healthy as I can be. I've also discovered, in spite of, or maybe because of living with narcolepsy, that I can do tough stuff. One thing I am particularly proud of is completing a PhD in peace and conflict studies. There I am on the left in my slide, 2023, 10 years after I started my PhD, graduated with my official piece of paper and a very large grin. Doing a doctorate is a pretty demanding undertaking, sleep disorder or not. So the fact I was able to persevere through some really challenging emotional and personal times, take on a full-time job and complete my thesis has been an incredible boost to my confidence, my belief in myself, and my understanding of some of my limitations. I knew my brain was really capable of the intellectual work, and yet I would sometimes get so frustrated that I couldn't work longer, faster, without sleeps. But the reality, as I am slowly learning, is that I might want to push things, but my narcolepsy means I just can't. I'm learning that narcolepsy and I are partners. We're part of each other. And as long as we work together in a respectful way, then amazing things can be accomplished. And I'm quite excited to see where the next things might lead me, what the next project might be for narcolepsy and I to take on together. There are so many things about my life and the quality of my life that I can thank my narcolepsy for. And I am incredibly grateful, particularly for the people in my life who have been there for me as I continue to work this out. The photo in the middle of the slide is an updated family portrait with two important differences from the photo on that first slide. Number one, obvious maybe, we're all a wee bit older. Number two, not so obvious, but it's quite special to me. Each of us has now graduated with a PhD. So this was our geeky Fab Four doctor's photo to celebrate me completing the set. Yeah. And I'm also incredibly lucky that my partner is incredible, even tolerating my silly selfies. He's very perceptive and will notice when I'm about to fall asleep much faster than I can. And I realize living with someone with narcolepsy must be a learning adventure in itself, so I deeply appreciate his patience and care. So, whatever the future is there for me, I know the best things happen when you can share your tough stuff and your amazing stuff with other people. My family and my partner are some of my biggest cheerleaders and supporters, and without these folk, the journey would not be as delightful, that's for sure. So, because of low awareness, even among physicians, and misperceptions, there's an average of 8 to 15 years between narcolepsy symptom onset and diagnosis. And it's estimated that the majority of people with narcolepsy are currently undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And common misdiagnoses include things like epilepsy, depression, and schizophrenia. So again, I was just very lucky to get diagnosed as quickly as I did. I never had to deal with the frustration or the fear of trying to work out what this thing I had was. And because of my diagnosis, I've also always had a name for the strange thing I do when I collapse to the ground or fall asleep in the middle of a cafe so suddenly that my hand falls into my latte. I want to share my story because I know living with narcolepsy can be deeply lonely. It's unknown. It can be hard to understand and often invisible to the people around you. While my friends and family have been incredibly understanding and supportive, they still see narcolepsy from the outside looking in. And sometimes you need to feel understood from the inside looking out. I hope sharing something of my own experience can help shine a light on this invisible and lifelong condition, and that increased education and awareness might make living with narcolepsy easier for someone else. It's estimated that 1 in 5 people are living with a sleep disorder, and there are a wide variety of sleep disorders, and symptoms can be hard to detect. So if you have questions about your own sleep, personalised support and resources are available through Project Sleep's Sleep Helpline, a free helpline for people facing sleep issues and sleep disorders. And for people here in Aotearoa New Zealand, if you're looking for support, there is a Narcolepsy New Zealand peer support Facebook group. I'm sharing my story today as part of Rising Voices, which is a program of the non-profit organisation Project Sleep, which empowers patient advocates to share their stories and improve public understanding of sleep disorders. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you so much, Liesel. That was absolutely amazing. Your story is incredibly inspiring, and there were so many things that I personally resonated with, and a ton of people in the comments sharing pieces of your story that resonated and the way you described things. Like you said, it can be very lonely, and we're very grateful that you were willing to be vulnerable and share that with us. So thank you so much. So we do have a little bit of time here now for some questions. I do want to just touch on, one thing, and then I'm going to pull on some questions from the audience. The Narcolepsy New Zealand Facebook group, I know you mentioned that, and you've got a bit of a story there. So we'd love to hear a little bit about, your involvement and kind of that piece of your journey.
Sure. Well, I think when I first got diagnosed, there was really very little support in New Zealand at all. Yeah, I think very little. And then when Facebook came along, I could see that there were other Facebook groups in the world for narcolepsy, but we didn't seem to have anything here. So I think this group I started, and it became a really well-run group. I handed it over to some other people who are doing an incredible job of running that group. And it's just great to see now that there's at least a place where people can come together and just share some of their stories and support each other. And it seems to be a really warm environment like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, I saw a couple of comments too, just about the community and, how powerful it is. And again, the fact that you were able to start that up using your own experience to, again, connect with people is really incredible. So we have a question from the audience. It says, you mentioned working full time. What do you do for work? And have you had to get any special arrangements or accommodations?
It's a really good question. I do work full time, and I have worked full time for most of my working life. Um, yes, I think I do get accommodations. I'm really open with my employer. Current employer knows that I have narcolepsy. I've always shared that with my employers. And I've found in every case, actually, that I've been employed, whatever I've been employed doing, I've had a lot of support from people, which has been really great because I know that isn't always the case. But I think having that transparency right away can help you work on how you manage that. And I think my current employer pretty much says, you do your job, and I work remotely. So I have the
Mhm.
capacity, I have the structure, I guess, to be able to go and have a little nap if I need to, and then come
Right.
back to work, and nobody needs to see that or know.
Yeah.
But he does know, my boss does know that that's what I do, and it's really just you get the work done,
Mhm.
but do it in the time frames that you can and what works for you, and that takes some of the pressure off, I guess, because some of it is about just feeling like you can go and have a nap,
Yeah.
and then you can keep going. Yeah, so I've been really lucky. I think the remote work uh, environment can really be quite conducive to people with sleep disorders because it does give us that sort of flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the flexibility is the biggest thing. Sometimes it's just, like you said, taking the pressure off. Yeah, makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, you're getting a ton of love in the comments. People
Fantastic.
expressing, how brave and this has come up a number of times, but just appreciating your vulnerability. So thank you. Yeah.
I I
Um,
think it's one of those things that I know I've talked to a few people before. Well, I don't know that many people with narcolepsy, but the people that I do know, it's not always comfortable to talk about it. But I think in my experience, when you can be honest with people and just share that this is what you have, not only are people usually genuinely interested, but it also just helps to, I don't know, make you feel more comfortable in your skin. So
yeah,
not hiding it from people because, like I said, it is invisible in many ways. Being able to
right.
bring it to light or start that conversation is actually really helpful for everybody.
Yeah. I guess, on that note, how did you end up finding out about the Rising Voices program and getting involved? Yeah.
The magic of social media. I mean, there's lots of things that you could say social media does not do well, but back in the day, I think when Facebook and things like that started up, I was aware of Julie, who, started Project Sleep. And I guess because there was just so little around about narcolepsy, I just, go searching on the internet, and Julie pops up with her book, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, somebody with narcolepsy talking about it, how incredible. And so I think I used to follow her blog post, and that kind of, I guess, awareness of Project Sleep has been in the back of my mind for quite a long time. But weirdly, I've just never thought about kind of bringing my story about narcolepsy out really at all. It is one of those things I'm quite open about, but I don't really talk about it much.
Right.
And the more I was sort of seeing Project Sleep work out there in the social media land, um, the more I started to think, hang on, I'm a researcher. Maybe I could contribute to this in some way. So I actually just reached out at one point and got in touch and said, hey, would you like any research support? And started to work a little bit with the team. And that actually, yeah, then Lauren suggested, why don't you join the Rising Voices program, apply for that? And I went, what is this amazing thing? And
Yeah, absolutely.
I've just been stoked to be a part of that. So yeah, it was just kind of a gradual synergy there that sort of, yeah,
Yeah.
came into being.
Amazing. I am very curious. You just, mentioned research and you talked about your PhD. First of all, huge congrats. Everyone, expressed a lot of just again finding that really inspiring and motivating. So I just finished my master's. I'm
Well,
curious to know, thank you.
yeah,
Um,
congratulations.
Thank you. So, that whole research piece is, to me really interesting too. What did you do your thesis on?
Well, peace and conflict studies is the overarching envelope.
Hmm.
Thesis was on, this is very current, large nonviolent campaigns that take down dictators and how nonviolent they are was effectively
Gotcha.
the sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
So, just a little sort of peace and conflict-y thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Gotcha. Yeah,
fascinating.
absolutely. And, you
Yeah.
mentioned it being kind of a 10-year process and um
Yeah.
I mean, it's yeah, grad school is definitely a massive undertaking. And, I'm sure over the course of 10 years, a lot of things would have evolved for you and happened. How did you go about, making those adjustments again over like a 10-year period? Did you notice evolution and, the types of things that you needed, or how you went about, coping with your
Hmm.
symptoms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I probably became more attuned to how I needed to cope with narcolepsy over 10 years. Strangely enough, I think to start with, I had high expectations of high and unrealistic expectations. I didn't take any compensation to start with. I just assumed I was normal. Of course, I was normal, and I could do what everybody else was doing. And sure, I'd complete my PhD in 3 to 4 years, like everybody else. I wasn't being honest with myself that I actually was not awake for half the day. So why would I be finishing this at the same rate as somebody who could stay awake for
Mhm.
the whole day?
Yeah.
I couldn't remember things. Things would drift out of my head. So once I started to acknowledge, actually, Liesel, you're a part-time PhDer. You're not a full-time PhDer. So why would you expect to finish it in this amount of time? So I probably became a little kinder to myself,
Hmm.
a little bit more realistic. I just set myself the task of every day try and write for 10 minutes. That was all I decided I'd do. And it's amazing how 10 minutes can become 2 hours, but
Yeah.
I um I didn't give myself any grief about not writing beyond 10 minutes. I gave myself lots of permission to have sleeps and things. And weirdly, that's when things start to free up as well. Once you've given yourself
Yeah.
permission to not put the pressure on and to realize you're not working at the same speed or pace as somebody who can stay awake. It's just not possible. So yeah, we try to be superheroes. It's like what we're superheroes with sleep capes on, something. I don't
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like, just the acknowledgement
Mm,
is a big part of that. Absolutely. So
yeah.
we have another question that's, kind of related, but do you have any advice for someone who's considering going to grad school while living with narcolepsy?
But um, yeah, I think what I've just said is some of the advice I'd give someone. Like, I think do it. Like, you can do it. But I think be realistic with yourself and be kind to yourself. You may need to take longer. You may need to do it your own way, and don't compete with others about that or set the bar, where you can see everybody else is going. Just do what you can do and you will be able to do it. Like, just truck away. But it's finding that sort of way that makes sense for you. So yeah, I totally support people. You can totally do it. Just do it the narcolepsy way. How cool is that?
I love that. Absolutely. That's Oh, I love that. And yeah, I mean, I think it's all about, like you said, figuring out what your needs are and taking that, sometimes we kind of fight and, it's like
Yeah.
we don't
We're
need to.
fighting ourselves. We don't need to do
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, there's lots of, I think it's, yeah, just tailoring it for yourself, being aware of your own needs, and not being afraid to ask for help, because I think I also thought I was a champion. I could do it all by myself. I
Mhm.
didn't need help
Right.
beyond sort of the regular help. So ask your university for, disability support. See if there's a scholarship that they're willing to, like give you help for. There's all sorts of things that might be out there as long as you actually say, I might need some help, because
Yeah.
that's perfectly okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. Do it the narcolepsy way.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a catchphrase for us.
Oh
Um,
yeah, it's a t-shirt right there.
right? Every grandson
Yeah.
needs that.
I
Um,
think so.
so I had a couple of questions as as you were sharing your story.
Hmm.
You talked about, your experience with, I think you said it was your doctor's research seminar. You were sitting there was all this medical jargon, and, as exciting as it was to be, front and center, I think you mentioned that, you kind of wondered why you weren't being asked anything. Did
Hmm.
that experience affect your decision to, ultimately share your story and, become a public advocate? Was that like it sounds like a defining moment. I don't know if it was for you, but curious to see, how that experience might have shaped the way you proceeded.
Hmm. It it definitely it was strange actually, because it was so soon after my diagnosis and I was, 15.
Yeah.
I felt really super special, but I just I didn't know why everybody was interested in this either. Like it didn't really make sense to me why, I just had this funny little laughing thing going on. Great. It was nice that I was there on the stage feeling, important, but yeah, I really didn't understand why this was happening.
Yeah.
And I guess at some level, I didn't really want to. At that point, I was happy to be like, a famous person, but I didn't really want to link that to this. I just couldn't really think beyond.
Yeah.
I fall over and laugh. Oh, well, that's kind of funny and quite cute, but
Right.
that was the extent of it. So at some level, that kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's more going back to it now that I think about
Yeah.
it and go, that was weird. And I wish that there'd been more engagement, maybe beyond that as well. Like, I mean, it was a one-off thing,
Hmm.
and I may have been asked a couple of questions, but if I was, they were not, I can't really remember.
Yeah.
It did feel like I was just a specimen sort of sitting on the
Yeah.
stage. Look at the cataplexy person. There she is,
Yeah.
alive. Yeah. Please fall over for us. No, I can't. You're not funny
Yeah.
enough. But yeah, I don't know. It was it just felt, yeah, it felt really dislocated from me. And I think that's what a lot of this has been like, though, I think until probably more recently, like in my last sort of 10 years.
Hmm.
Um, I really have been quite dislocated, I think, from this. You sort of put it in oh, that's over there, the weird laughy, collapsy, sleepy thing, that's over there. It's like, no,
Yeah.
it's here it is. So yeah, I'd love to have another opportunity to sit on that stage and have
Yeah.
a conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's interesting when we reflect back on things that, in the moment you kind of just go, yeah, that's what it was. And
yeah,
yeah. Well, now you're a
yeah.
rising voice as speaker, so I hope you pursue
Take,
an
yeah,
exciting opportunity to do just that. Because again, that
yeah.
storytelling piece and your story and your voice is such an important part of that. Yeah.
I'd love to be able to contribute a little bit more to the education and advocacy around sleep conditions, particularly narcolepsy,
Yeah.
especially in New Zealand. I think here in Aotearoa, we don't have much available to us. So when I say
Right.
the Facebook group is there, that's because really I might be completely wrong, but that's really it.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of information out there, and there's a little bit, yeah, but it really needs to grow in awareness. So I'd love to be part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious. about, going back to, like you said, those early days, um,
Mm.
and those sort of first two episodes of cataplexy. After it happened the first time, you mentioned, your mom thought you were being a little bit dramatic, and,
Drama queen.
that's what Liesel
Yeah.
does, right? In that time between it happening again, and it, being witnessed, was it, did you kind of do the same thing where it was very compartmentalized and you were like, this is just a thing, or did it sit in the back of your mind at all? Like, did you wonder what is it? Like, just curious about kind of what your feelings and thoughts were at the time.
Mm. I think I knew there was something weird going on, but it it didn't seem extreme. Like I wasn't experiencing pain. It was
Yeah,
kind of funny. It was weird.
yeah,
It was happening in funny moments as well. So
yeah,
it's quite hard to kind of when something happens when you're laughing, it's
yeah,
quite hard for you to take it seriously. And it's also quite hard for other people to take it seriously. So at some level, I was like, this thing's happening. My mum says I'm being a bit dramatic. Maybe I am. It is a
yeah,
bit weird though, but maybe it's just me being dramatic, like I'm laughing, and that's kind of
yeah,
cool. No. I think I knew there was something wrong. And I don't know how long I would have sort of gone with that for. Like, I mean, I imagine if my mum hadn't seen me collapse, I imagine if it kept happening, I would have
yeah,
come back and sort of said, hey, there's something really strange happening here.
right,
Like, I know you haven't seen it, but it is
yeah,
strange. And yeah, so yeah, and that is the trouble, I think, with the cataplexy because it gets triggered by such sort of like exciting emotions.
yeah,
It can be really hard for people to sort of go, oh, are you okay when you're laughing, And it's like, but you're having fun. I'm like, but
yeah,
I'm not, but I am, but I'm not. Like it's a very strange sort of thing to try and work out. So as a 15-year-old, I was like, I'm just a 15-year-old. I don't know. I'm laughing. It's pretty weird though. Yeah.
yeah. No, that's actually such an interesting point. I mean, I'm thinking of, like, my first experience too, and like you said, it happens in a moment of like humor or whatever, and yeah, that definitely, like, that's such a good point. Like, it totally colors the way you remember it or experience it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a really weird thing, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you laugh, you think you're having a good time, and,
Yeah.
someone will tickle me and I'll be laughing, and then I'm collapsing, and then it's not okay. And then I'm
Yeah.
crying, and then they're going, but you're laughing. I'm like, but I'm crying. But
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of
it's a lot of emotion
processing.
that's
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
quite confusing. And I think if you are experiencing these symptoms as a teenager, that's one of those times in your life when so much is confusing and your hormones and your feelings and your emotions are all over the show. So trying to sort of work this kind of thing out is, I mean, at one level, it's like the least of your worries. Like you're like, well, so I fall over and I collapse a bit. Well, that's not as bad as does he really like me? Or, that song makes me feel so much emotion when I hear it.
Yeah.
Like, those are more important than
Yeah.
does my friend still like me? Yeah, it's all these things that are way more important than I fell over when I was laughing. Yeah,
Right.
so it is a confusing thing.
Yeah. Makes sense. So I think we're pretty much coming up on time. Again, just tons of people expressing gratitude for you sharing your story. And again, a lot of people relating. So thank you once again for being willing to participate and to share with us today. Um, yeah, it means a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I really appreciate being offered this opportunity. Yeah, been really special for me as well. So thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you, and thank you to everyone else who is joining us here today. Thank you for all your questions, and for all the support that we're showing Liesel. It's been a pleasure for me to host today's broadcast and get to chat with you, Liesel. And it's been a wonderful
Yay.
way to raise awareness ahead of World Narcolepsy Day. I do just want to remind everyone that. We do have another featured event coming up on World Narcolepsy Day, which is Saturday, September 22nd, right around the corner. I'll be moderating a panel on how storytelling brings narcolepsy to light. And we'll discuss a new collaborative article that's featured in Scientific American on this topic. So please be sure to join us at 9 a.m. Eastern on September 22nd, World Narcolepsy Day, right here on Project Sleep's YouTube channel to tune in. And also you can check out our virtual photo booth, take some fun photos, and continue to raise awareness for World Narcolepsy Day. Please keep sharing on social media. We love seeing everyone's posts. And so that brings us to the end of tonight's event. Thanks again to everyone for joining and participating. And again, thank you, Liesel, for sharing your powerful and inspiring story. I hope everyone has a wonderful World Narcolepsy Day, and good night to everyone. Thank you.